The other guy was calling me. His father-in-law was soldering some pipe on the outside of the house on the wall and set the thing on fire. Last week, I've gotten so many phone calls where people literally were like, hey, I didn't even know where to start.
Count the costs, understand what it is you want to do, and then find the right people to help you accomplish that vision.
I feel like this is like becoming a dream team. So, Alex and Devon, I appreciate you all joining yet again. I feel like this is like becoming the dream team. This is our second episode. Last time we left off and we were talking about a bunch of stuff. We were talking about residential. We were talking about, just working through things and where people should start when it comes to, larger projects. I think today, it makes sense for us to kind of leave off where we left off about, below, I guess, what would that be? Below 3-family residential? Is that what kind of the zone that you all were alluding to?
One and two family.
1 or 2 families.
1 and 2 family. Okay.
You get to 3 and it's a commercial building.
That's right. Any additional commentary on that as far as the differentiation between the two? Because I know one, obviously we're going to be switching over. Well, we are in the 2021 code now in Wisconsin, correct? As of September 1st. I haven't fully dived into all the implications of that. However, I know that fire sprinklers become a thing, correct? After you branch outside of 2-family, right?
Yes. I think the biggest thing, especially in Wisconsin, particularly in Milwaukee, there were some apartment fires that really started getting legislators and political officials concerned because there's loss of life. So on the local levels and statewide levels, they'll be looking to see what happens or what is needed for upgrades in that sort of area. Because there are a lot of buildings pre 2021 or 70s and 80s buildings that don't have sprinkler systems. And so the question becomes, how do you compel landlords to upgrade their systems?
That's a tough one. You basically just said like, hey, go spend some money for what they're going to see as an unnecessary reason, correct?
Correct.
And I mean, what you're, Scott, go ahead, Devon.
Yeah, but does the new code have the 2021 have more retroactive, more robust retroactivity for the requirements? Because recall, for most part, for most buildings, I mean, assuming there's no change in occupancy, no change in occupancy type, for most part, the sprinkler piece is really not retroactive, right? Do I have that right?
Well, it depends, right? What if a building is undergoing an alteration? How big is the alteration? And, will it compel you into upgrading the building to meet current code? And I now looked at specifically at the Wisconsin 2021 code update. And so I don't particularly know if Wisconsin is compelling landowners and property owners to do those upgrades. So it depends on what the code is saying. There are exceptions for certain things, but, if you're converting an existing building from a use to a new use, it's looked at as a new building.
Right.
So you are going to be compelled to put in a sprinkler system. And then to what kind of sprinkler system is going to be the question. Is this an R13? Is it a full NFPA 13 system? Each one of those has different requirements to the hazard level. So, there's plenty of requirements and exceptions. But the whole idea of the code is to make a building as safe as possible, regardless of the cost. And so it becomes on a budget line item in landowners' budget to do such systems.
Yeah. I mean, I recall that part of the whole code philosophy is that you have there has to be a balance between, cost efficiency and the safety piece, which sounds a little weird, but when we speak about it in public, we like to make it sound like safety is ultimate and absolute, which it is. But the reality is that there is a risk management consideration in the code requirements, as I understand it. So my guess is that there is still going to be a balance between, levels of safety and the cost.
Otherwise, I think the question is going to be, what are the Wisconsinisms per se?
Right.
The exceptions that the legislature have passed, and I just haven't delved into it to see what those are, and what relief the code has written into itself already.
Right.
Those would be the things that need to be discovered as people go through these processes, because there are no shortage of existing buildings that have issues. And I mean, with that, the biggest thing, though, I think, with the new 2021 code is going to be the energy efficiency for the buildings. A new building, the 2021 𝘰𝘂𝑐c, is way more energy efficient than anything previous that Wisconsin was on. And most states, I would believe, the requirements are just a lot different because of the climate zone that Wisconsin is in. And so I think you'll see a lot more, you'll have to see a lot more planning on the front end of a new construction building to meet the 2021 𝘰𝘂𝑐c, if that's what Wisconsin has adopted, without it doing any changes to the model code itself.
To the best of your knowledge, there hasn't been, Wisconsin hasn't done too many modifications to the text of the 𝘰𝘂𝑐c, or to any one of those 2021 codes with respect to the requirements, right? My recollection is that they don't typically make too many adjustments to those.
Well, I think the question is, did they keep I think they were on the 2009 version of 𝘰𝘂𝑐c, even when they adopted the 2015.
Oh, okay.
Because they were subject to the builder lobby, so just kind of, they maintained certain things. So that's really the question. Did they acquiesce to the building code lobby and the builder lobby because of those requirements? And because the requirements step things up quite a bit in terms of energy efficiency and the building envelope. And, it requires a certain amount of testing and troubleshooting through the construction. Say in North Carolina, since I'm in North Carolina right now, a lot of the buildings we do have to meet Energy Star requirements, which requires testing energy efficient, 93 and 95% energy efficient appliances and whatnot, air sealing. So you're making a building super tight. And so you need to have more mechanical systems to offset that, which becomes another issue, because now you're talking about more money and more holes in the exterior walls to vent these buildings. And it just presents a lot more questions in terms of, how do you ventilate these things? What systems are you putting in? How tight are we making? What's the window energy defense factors? You're balancing all that with cost, and it gets expensive. And so what you built a building for 5 years ago at a price might be 5% to 10% more in cost. It makes a difference.
Yeah. I guess on a single family, obviously you're like, that's a mortgage, right?
Right.
So you want to keep...
I think the discussion thus far is all commercial, right?
Yeah.
So I guess how does that play out in 1 and 2 family? Is that something that's still a thing when it comes to that level of energy efficiency requirements or anything like that? Or what's applicable on that 1 and 2 family scale?
I don't think so. Wisconsin's unique
Right.
in that
They
they
use the
have their
uniform
own
building code, right?
building code,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right? Most states adopt the IRC, but
mhm.
Wisconsin does not.
Right. They do for some components of the construction, like for deck construction and the shear wall requirements. They do make some references to the IRC and the UDC. The few instances like those. I've had to do a few situations where I found the IRC more appropriate, and therefore found out that the UDC does in fact allow, in other words, the UDC say if it's acceptable by IRC, we're going to accept it. There are a few instances like that, but yeah, you're right. The UDC is a bit different. Although what you find is that for most part, the requirements are very similar. It's just the matter that there's no reference to IRC. The law of the land is the UDC.
Right. I think the bigger issues when it comes to understanding how does that play into a lot of the older structures that are in the city of Milwaukee is one of the issues, right? I think that Milwaukee has a wide amount of the big 3-story duplexes or even single families with a large attic space, 12 pitch, which is an occupiable space. I think the question is, and always has been, oh, we have this attic space, it's unoccupied, I need more space, how do I occupy my attic?
Yeah. I guess clear and concisely is the answer to that. Use 400 square feet and wall off the rest, right? Put a door. See it as unoccupied space. Basically, you can finish out 400 square feet, right?
You finish up to 400 square feet without having a second exit.
Correct.
In that space. And the caveat there, though, it should not be sleeping area either. Technically.
Okay. Technically speaking, okay.
It can be a wall.
Otherwise, habitable, not sleeping.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. But what you just said a second ago was, hey, you throw a second exit, right? So if you have that, like that duplex, right? 3 stories, you have the balcony out front that's over the porch, right? You could technically drop a stair, because most times it's like some type of center or double window on the front of the house, right? Could open that up, make it a door, drop a stair out of there, and then ultimately have 2 exits out of that floor, and then it'll be fully occupiable, correct?
There's a separation requirement that needs to occur in order to get that. Now, you also have to think, how do you insulate it? A lot of times they're uninsulated. So you're insulating the rafters. So what type of insulation, weather barriers and whatnot. Can you extend a furnace or air conditioning line to that space to heat and cool it? So, there are more logistics to think about in order to make it an occupiable space as a sleeping quarters.
Well, even just to think about making it occupiable in the first place, the one big consideration must be made, and that is it can't be an independent space. In other words, it's occupiable, but it has to be a part of the floor immediately below it. Otherwise, you're going into 3 units. And then that changes the whole calculus.
So it can't be an independent unit, which would basically confirm that it's like sleeping, right?
So let's say the building were one family before, then obviously you have no problem, because you still, even if you make it independent, you'd have to put in all of these, second egress and all of these kind of things. But you would still be within the 2-family piece, so you don't change the code that you're working with. If, however, you make this a separate unit from 2 existing units, then you're in a totally new ball game. And oftentimes it's almost an impossible ball game to win, because my experience is that the big issues, in addition to egress, is the fire separation requirements that come into play. Your exterior walls now need a special kind of fire rating, because you don't have the appropriate separation required under the commercial code. So I often advise against even doing that, unless if you have a big lot, it simplifies the whole consideration. But big lot meaning that you are far enough away from your property line, but having to build.
Can you explain the significance of that? Can you break out the significance of being far from the property line?
The commercial code requires a certain amount of separation from your property line for buildings, or for commercial buildings generally. Now, if this is not applicable or this is not a requirement in the UDC, except for zoning purposes. Correct me if I misspeak here, Alex, but to the best of my recollection, you don't have that fire separation requirement in the UDC, but you do have separation from a zoning perspective. Once you switch to commercial, then you now start going into that 10 feet requirement, unless you have special firewalls, which have to be constructed a certain way.
So 10 feet from the firewall, or 10 feet
no,
from
10
the
feet from
building?
Your property line, as minimum distance, before requiring this. Depending on the height of the building and the use, these walls could go up to 4 hour, 2 hours typical, I think. But there are instances where you need even a higher fire rating than that in the firewall. And it has to be a firewall, which requires a special kind of construction. So for your typical residential building, that would probably require redoing the many of your exterior walls completely.
Gotcha. And a firewall, if correct me if I'm wrong, it needs to actually stand up and allow for everything, right? So it's structurally independent from everything else, right? So the concept is, if there's a fire here, everything can burn down over here, and that wall will literally stand independently, correct?
Yes, but in the context of the exterior wall of a house, then because you don't have unless it's condo or attached. I mean, if it's the exterior wall, you typically wouldn't have anything attached to it on one side. Therefore, therefore, that requirement for the independent collapse is not, or the breakaway requirement is not, doesn't come into play.
Because the breakaway has everything to do with the floor structure not being tied into that wall, correct?
Right.
Or just having separate connections.
Think about it. Maybe the easier way to understand that concept is to think about why it's a requirement. Okay. And that has to do with the fact that if your neighbor's building burns, they don't want a situation that just because your neighbor's building burned, your building also burns. So you want that wall to be structurally independent. So if components in your neighbor's building were to fail and cause the roof and floor systems to fail, you want that wall to be still standing so that your building doesn't fail as a result of failure of your neighbor's building.
Okay.
So
in like a townhome situation where you're having things like row housing, right?
you
would want literally an independent physical wall. So it's almost like you're building a unit, a wall, and then another unit, right?
Well, that's a way. That's one way of looking at it. There is a way to do it structurally, so that the tie into those walls from each one of these buildings is what you call soft, so that instead of it pulling the wall away, when any tied-in component pulls, it separates from the wall rather than pulling the wall with it.
I see what you're saying.
So oftentimes they call the connections there breakaway connections or some soft connections.
I got you.
Yeah.
Getting all technical on us right now. Okay. Absolutely.
No.
That's it. No, that's good.
No, as I say, the one way of looking at it is just remember that the idea is to prevent a collapse on one side of the wall to take the wall down.
Absolutely.
Taking the wall down with it, so that you have protection for the
100%.
building on the other side. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I think how I learned about it when I was studying for the exams to become an architect was if you have like a cast, like let's say a concrete masonry unit, a CMU wall, right? And sometimes let's say you have a precast plank, right? And it's halfway recessed into the wall and bearing on the wall. So you have like 4 inches of bearing and let's say it's an 8-inch, CMU. If that actual precast or whatever that floor structure is notched into that wall and it starts to, rotate, right? It could literally, it's like a lever, it props up that wall and then that top piece could easily fall off, right? As opposed to like what you're talking about is something that would literally maybe even fail due to the fire, correct? Like it would actually melt away and not actually compromise.
No, I get what you're saying. No, not exactly. It's exactly like it's like you describe it. But you have many ways of achieving that you just described. The idea, like you say, if that floor system fails, you want it falling off the wall somehow without pulling the wall with it.
Gotcha.
So whether that is a situation where it rotates and easily pull off from the wall, or you have a connection that is so soft in one direction. So think about it this way: when you connect two things together in a building, it's going to be resisting downwards, it's going to be resisting sideways, and it could, in some instances, be resisting what you call rotation, resisting that as well. So what you do is that you would have it set up so that this resistance is not that strong.
Gotcha.
Something happens on this side, and this just easily pull away and fall out.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So maybe let's double back now. 1 and 2 family residential, right? Regardless of all these technical things that we're talking about and all the zoning, and I mean, we don't necessarily expect the everyday person to understand all these concepts, right? As professionals, like, we understand that that's technically the reason why they would need to or want to hire a professional to understand the codes and to understand what's required in order to carry out those codes, correct?
Well, you are right in that the technical piece, not everyone need to worry themselves about because it's some of these discussions don't make for nice party discussions and that kind of stuff. So it's probably
So
probably
the
going to
good
be a little
cocktail
bit
talk.
that might be a little bit too boring for everybody. But I think the essence is just to remember that modification, especially when we're talking about adding usable spaces, adding spaces that you're going to be using for any reason. First thing, you have to consider what you're going to use it for. As Alex pointed out, if you're using it for sleeping purposes, the requirements might be a little bit more robust. You might have some tougher requirements that you have to overcome. But in any event, if you're making a space that was not previously habitable into a habit, you just have to recognize that it's not necessarily a straightforward process. Not just because you have a nice big space there doesn't necessarily mean you can use it.
Yep, I got you.
So
it's like basements and third floors are like under that category, right? As far as especially when it comes to sleeping.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of, so last week, I've gotten so many phone calls where people literally were like, hey, I didn't even know where to start when it came to, what I need to do with my house. I mean, I've been doing a lot of fire restorations. I had one client actually. The guy was calling me. His father-in-law was soldering some pipe on the outside of the house on the wall and set the thing on fire. So they're in an Airbnb right now. And and it's kind of ironic. They're building an in-law suite. So it's just like, so it's kind of like they had to go through a process, right? And then some people, I met another couple, they're about to get married. And they want to expand their home, and they were trying to figure out if they should go up or should go out. They talked to the contractor. The contractor told them, oh, no, you definitely want to not go up, so things like that. I reiterated to them that what we tell all the people, like, we must go through it as a technical exercise first, right? Let's figure out what the actual parameters are, what you need.
That's always an interesting question, though. Alex, your thought, because up or out, I think code-wise, up is probably more troublesome code-wise, right?
I mean, it depends. It depends.
What the neighbor?
What is your neighborhood?
That's right. That's right. Your lot size, right?
Lot size, zoning requirements are one thing. How do you meet if you're doing addition in one of the neighborhoods? It depends what type of neighborhood it's in. Depends on what and when the house was built.
Right. And when you say what type of neighborhood, you mean from a zoning perspective, right?
Right. Well, I mean,
okay.
Milwaukee has a lot of different neighborhoods. If we're specifically talking about Milwaukee, right? And they have a range of the old school, very tight, close to your neighbors, and then as you gradually go out from the center of the city, you have more suburban-like feeling type of homes. The age of the home matters. Any sort of new construction, meaning 2000 and on, you're going to have a different type of construction than if you had pre-2000. And so that kind of type of construction does matter. I mean, if you're going to expand on a builder home, then you might as well go out instead of up, because you're modifying prefabricated stuff that just can't be easily modified. And so if you're doing an older home, say pre-2000, pre-1990, any of those things, it's easier. Stick build. They probably don't have trusses, engineered trusses at least. And you're probably able to do a addition going up differently. But then a lot of times people have budgets. And so you're not going to see people take off a floor of their house to go up, because that's expensive. You're doing a whole new house. And I would only do that if I was in a nice suburb where, you're going to get your return on your investment and that kind of thing. So I think neighborhood matters. How big and how large the addition could be matters. All those things play into one's budget. What are you expanding? Is it bedroom, kitchen, bathroom? Got to think about plumbing, electrical. Where are you putting air conditioning unit? In the city, all those things matters because there are setback requirements for air conditionings. You put an air conditioning unit in the front yard, you can't do it. So side yard, you have enough space between the houses to do it. So that leaves you with one option in the backyard for air conditioning units and whatnot. We haven't spoken about basements, but occupiable basements. We want to have a room in our basement. That's fine. But you also, if you want to sleep down there, you also need to have a way to get out of there. So that often involves some sort of a unit for a unit window that you can climb out of. So what are the requirements for that? And there are specific things that within codes, the Wisconsin Unified Dwelling Code, that gets you there. But you need to have the dwelling around that window, the escape window, needs to go down a certain amount. Then you have to have a certain type of window. It has to be so many feet off the ground in the basement. So, there are a lot of things to consider. Also, the comfortability of that space. A lot of times basements are just CMU walls with no insulation, especially if it's an older home. You need to insulate that basement wall now, which means furrowing it out, meaning building another wall on the interior so you can achieve the level of comfortability on the interior. And, recently with that flooding in Milwaukee, do you really want to do that?
Yeah.
Have to repair all those spaces and be subject to sewage backups. But if that's the only space that you have, then sure, and you need the space.
I'm about to say, let's pause right there and let's poke that bear. Let's poke that basement bear.
Yeah, my friend, Alex just scared the people. But it's probably not that bad, Alex. You raise a very good point. That obviously the flooding in the basement has to be a consideration. So the trick then is, how do you mitigate that? Are you in a situation where you can mitigate that? Because there are some instances where you probably can't. You probably are in an area that's prone to flooding. And if you are, then maybe, hanging out in the basement for anything other than utility is probably not smart. But many places in the city are not that prone to flooding. And in those instances, it's a matter of having your yard environment set up so as to limit the amount of, water intrusion into the basement. There are a number of steps that we can take to minimize wet basements, for example. The first and easiest one is probably maintenance of your drainage systems. Specifically your gutters and downspouts, etc.
Yeah, that's something that people usually don't think about, right? No, just saying that's something that people usually don't. They look in the basement, they're like, "Oh, I got water." They're looking for cracks. They're looking for, and it could literally just be the fact that you have too many leaves, right, in the actual gutter that's causing to spill over.
That is correct. And then if that system doesn't work efficiently, then you have them overflowing and saturating the soils adjacent to the walls, increase the pressure on the walls, cause all kinds of, in addition to having excess water buildup beside your walls, so you have enough pressure to squeeze that water through any little pore or crack in your wall. And the reality is that when we build most structures, most of our basements are built from some type of concrete system. So whether it's concrete masonry walls, conventional block walls, or whether it's built from concrete, these things are going to naturally have some cracking. They aren't designed to be perfectly watertight. I mean, there are steps we take in modern construction to limit water infiltration, like preparing the exterior face of the basement wall with some waterproofing to, limit any kind of water penetration. But the big things that people often, big, small things, they have a big impact, but relatively low cost and relatively small from a technical perspective. Just keeping the grades, the ground, the surface adjacent to the building, so sloping away from the building. So you don't have water ponding at the side of the walls and that kind of stuff. And with respect to flooding, especially in the context of Milwaukee, the reason I was messing with Alex about that statement is because in one of my lives, I spent some time with entity responsible for limiting flooding to basements and that kind of stuff. So the thinking is that Milwaukee and many of the other places are much better these days at the municipal systems are much better at handling these large intensity events, so you don't have basement flooding. So theoretically, the chance of basement flooding is supposed to be significantly lower these days. So people should be a little bit more comfortable doing things in their basement today than they should have been in 1998, for example.
So not even that long ago.
Probably more of those rare, 1 in 50 years sort of events that was just experienced.
Well, the one we just experienced here is said to be a 1 in 1,000. So it was a 0.1% event.
Wow.
That one was substantial. Yeah. And even then, the systems apparently performed quite well.
So. I know I saw this one Facebook video where, this one local gentleman was literally taking it upon himself to go grab, one of those like little reachers, with the little clamp at the end. Right. He was actually cleaning out, the actual sewer entrance, right there in the street, right, where it's supposed to drain off, because there was so much garbage and stuff. And always talk about people, people don't understand the concept of how littering impacts our environment, right? And that was a case in point where our sewer system could be literally sized appropriately, right, for what it needs to handle. However, the actual physical entrances, those drains where the water needs to, escape into the sewer, right, is being blocked by so much debris. Those inlets in the street, right? Yes, that becomes a thing. So it's almost like the concept of saying, you got gutters, but they're clogged, right? Or you have like you said, the grade is sloping, meeting the ground, instead of it sloping away from your house. So when the water hits it or drains away, it's hitting and it's draining toward it. And it literally only needs any type of positive slope, correct? So it doesn't matter how much it is. If it's not sloping the opposite way, it's sloping toward it, right?
That's exactly the point. If you let the water, the soils adjacent to your building get saturated, then clearly, that water has all kinds of time to do its thing and find its way into the building eventually. So the idea is to, minimize the saturation of the soils adjacent to the building.
I got you. That's that term they call hydrostatic pressure, right?
That is correct. You are right. It's that hydrostatic pressure that is responsible for many of the problems we see in the basement. So you are correct. The idea is to keep the water away to limit that pressure.
I got you.
I mean,
I know you before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Many times we go into these basements, and I get called in to do a structural inspection on a basement because someone noticed that their basement walls have some kind of crack, or that it's deflected inside, or it's bowed inside. You know, it's the wall, instead of being straight, is bent inside, bent inwards. And almost entirely, it's one of these instances where you look on the outside, it's the ground isn't sloped properly, meaning the ground is sloped towards the building. There is ponding. You could see evidence of ponding taking place over a number of years. Because for one thing, these aren't instantaneous. These don't take place immediately. It's typically related to a lack of maintenance over an extended period of time.
Gotcha. So this isn't something that just appears. You're
No,
saying literally
no.
this has been a gradual decline
It's
over.
gradual.
I got you. Okay.
You know, you have these rare instances where there might be some kind of stream develop underground and cause some problems, or but other than that, you're not going to have, in the very rare occasions, some of the other problems are related to, trees being too close. Because if you have these broadleaf trees, any of these deciduous trees, these things have these big, powerful roots. If you have them near your building, they too could grow and just push your basement wall in, causing, I've even seen them cause collapse of portions of basement wall. But typically, it's related to maintenance of the site or your gutters and that kind of thing.
Okay. I know we had started this piece of the conversation regarding, occupying the basement, whether that was to be occupiable space or not. You were kind of going down a list. What do people need to know now? I mean, we had this, like you said, once in a 1,000-year rain event. I got water in my basement. What are the things I need to consider now with, just restoring that space back to either usable space or maybe not usable space?
Firstly, I recognizing that this is the 1 in 1,000 event, I wouldn't make that event be the sole consideration for whether I use the space for what I previously used. So in other words, if I had it as an occupied basement, I wouldn't recommend that one say I'm not going to use it as an occupiable space anymore because it got flooded this time. Because, it might get flooded again, but, from a risk management perspective, you're thinking, this is a once in a 1,000-year thing.
Mm-hmm.
But each individual have to make a decision as to what level of risk they're willing to deal with. But in terms of consideration of rebuilding, I mean, it's a matter of kind of making sure first all the small things, some of which we mentioned before, the making sure your drainage systems work properly. And by drainage system, I mean, your roof drainage system, gutters, downspout. Modern buildings are built with drain tiles that lead the water away at the foundation level. Older houses, the very older ones, might not have these, and even the ones that had them, they could be compromised by now, meaning clogged, or roots going and destroying them, or the material themselves just in the old days they used some clay drain tiles. I have seen a number of these things just crush and collapsed.
I get that.
So those one might want to investigate getting those repaired, all that kind of stuff. But that tends to be very intrusive. The first steps I always recommend, get your drainage systems working properly, especially the ones you can see. If those don't make the place less damp, or if you don't see less evidence of moisture coming into the building after you do all of that, then you're probably want to get someone come in and do a more detailed investigation, like a basement specialist. But again, first step, make sure you maintain gutters, downspouts, the land adjacent to your building. Yes, always make sure the water flows away.
That makes sense.
So,
Makes total sense.
Yeah, I don't even know if we veered off topic a little bit. I don't know if we answered the question about whether we should go up or down in terms of construction. I think.
So let me ask this. I'll say, instead of so I do have a client right now that is like, hey, if I do go up, they would want to build literally over. They have, let's say there's a typical rectangle, that was the actual house, right? And then you can tell at some point, or this might have been the actual construction of it, there's a smaller rectangle that's added onto the back of the house that doesn't have a full basement. It's just a crawl space. The foundations come down. If they were to just want to build on top of that, could they just keep their existing foundation walls and just go up? Or would they need to now reinforce additional structure, in order to go to that second level?
That is always a big question. We should not answer that with a yes or no here, because it has so serious implication.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be properly investigated by a professional. And the reasons are the foundation system, meaning, if they have a basement wall, then that wall would have been sized to take a certain weight on top of it. Going higher means you're adding weight. And so you're adding weight and you're adding what we call load. We can't stay on a podcast and determine whether any system would be adequate for that. What I can say is that it is possible that the existing foundations might be adequate to carry relatively small additional loads. Generally, though, to go up another story would typically require a fairly significant investigation of the foundations.
We're going back to the original point.
I was about to say that it often requires some modification. But then it dawned on me that when you're doing, what we call typical light frame construction, so we're talking about 1-2 stories made from wood.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, they have the foundation systems are what you call prescriptive, meaning you look in a document, and the document, for example, the UDC would say use this size footing, so that means that if you're going from a 1-story to a 2-story, that would have already been considered in that prescriptive footing design, that minimum footing design that they. And so it's entirely possible that you could put a new building, a new addition
It's like a second floor,
without
is what you're
having
saying.
to make significant modifications to the existing.
So you're saying if I
However,
have one floor, I could probably, maybe, obviously it needs to be investigated, add a second floor. You're not saying I got 2 floors now I'm trying to add a third, right?
no, I'm not saying that. Because
Right.
the code requirements change significantly then, and then even from a structural perspective, height is probably enough to significantly affect wind loads and that kind of thing. So it's not. Yeah, I'm thinking about if you're going from 1 floor to 2 floors.
Absolutely, which that would be typical for most residential
That
instances,
is
correct?
And even then, I am not saying that one should do that without having it investigated by a qualified professional.
Which would be, in this instance, most likely a structural engineer like yourself, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, it's a matter of the professional being qualified. Because
okay, what makes that professional qualified?
An architect, for example, is trained to run many of the calculations required to determine adequacy. Okay. You are right that the structural engineer would typically have spent more time with these investigations and therefore probably can get to the right solution more rapidly. You are right that a structural engineer is probably your best bet. But what matters is that the professional needs to be able to run the appropriate calculation, to be able to identify this condition he's working with, determine the loads that he's working with, and also understand what systems need to be in place to support the loads that are going to be imparted onto the building. So, yeah, the structural engineer would be the best bet, but I typically like to say qualified professional. That way I'm safe.
No, we actually want to do that. That's the name of the game. So I know we have to wrap our time right now. So I guess, are there any concluding thoughts when it comes to residential from either one of you, 1 and 2 family, when it comes to, maybe a quick 30 seconds at max? Like, is there any thing that you could tell someone that, they're about to, they want to embark on something on their home? Like, where do they start?
So I would say that count the costs, understand what it is you want to do, what is the absolute necessity and requirements that you need to do any sort of building projects, any addition, alteration, renovation. Count the costs, understand what it is you want to do, and then find the right people to help you accomplish that vision. And kind of budget. Because maybe your budget your budget could be smaller than what you think you can get done for what you have. And then always find the qualified people to do the renovation, interview contractors, interview architects. Everyone's going to have a different approach to how you want to accomplish the building.
Devon, any concluding thought?
Yeah, no, just agreeing with Alex. I mean, the essence is, first, make sure you fully understand what it is you want to do. Once you know what you want to achieve, then always go and procure the services of an architect first. In a number of instances, it sounds like it costs a lot more, but it saves so much more time and headache. Because then you'll be guided into determining, even to with respect to the budget, then you get a proper sense of what the budget ought to be. Because in buildings, that budget thing is often an iterative process, because you think this is what you needed, but then when the consultant explains to you, okay, because you want this kind of use, it means that these additional things that you hadn't considered need to be done. So first, make sure you fully understand what you want to do, and then procure the services of an architect. And so you have an idea of what the requirements are going to be. Then you go and you seek a number of qualified contractors to provide you a bid.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate all your knowledge, both of you. I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge and experience within these fields. So I do appreciate you all kind of sharing with everyone and spending this time. As always, you guys can reach out to us at info@dreambuilders with the SMKE.com. And I will definitely make sure that Alex and Devon's contact information are available if they want to be available. Because sometimes, getting hunted down by people, that's a good and bad thing, right? But I'm pretty sure, Devon, he's always accessible. And Alex, he's in North Carolina. He does all this development stuff. I don't know he has time for us. No, just kidding. This stuff probably
we've got time from Milwaukee.
No, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. So you gentlemen, until next time, when we unpack the next set of thoughts and issues and opportunities, I appreciate your time and stay blessed. Catch you guys later.